The next step is to create our goal sections. So my first area of need is decoding. So I'm going to come down to the section that I've already created titled decoding. In the description, I'm just going to copy and paste the annual goal from my student's IEP. This will allow me to refresh my memory when I'm going in and I'm collecting the data for this specific goal. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a drop-down question. So I'm going to click the little plus button. And I'm going to change my answer to drop down. Now, this goal that I have for decoding has multiple different benchmarks. So in different benchmarks, we're measuring slightly different things. This would be the same thing as with a transition goal where you have one overarching transition goal, but then you have multiple transition activities. So you can use the same idea with a transition goal. So just as the question, I'm going to put benchmark. And then in my options, I'm just going to add briefly what each benchmark looks like. So I'm just copying this from the IEP, but it doesn't have to be the complete verbiage that we see in the benchmarks of the IEP. So blend and read 14 out of 20 art-controlled vowel patterns. This only works though if this verbiage makes sense to everybody who will be collecting the data. So if you need to collaborate with your team to make sure that everybody has a good understanding of what these mean, then go ahead and do so. But make sure it's just whatever works best for everyone. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to continue adding these benchmarks. And I'll add my fourth here. So this is just going to make it easy to understand when you go in to collect the progress monitoring data, which benchmark you're working on and which area you are actually progress monitoring. Okay, so we want to make sure that we are not making any of these questions now required because we don't want it to stop us from responding if we don't answer any of the other sections in the survey. I'm now going to add an additional question here. And this, I'm going to make short answer, and I'm just going to include my data point. So this is where I would add, if we were in benchmark 1, assessing art-controlled vowel patterns, I would then add that the student got 16 out of 20 correct. So that's where I would enter this in this short text area. The final thing that I'm going to add for this goal is I'm going to add one more question, and I'm going to come down to where it says file upload. So I'm going to have to click continue. This is asking us to make sure that we can upload files. So from here, I'm just going to type upload artifact. We want to keep this unchecked. We can allow all file types. The maximum number of files, we should just do one because we're only going to need one file per data point that we are collecting. When you come in, I would create the largest maximum file size. But before we do that, we need to take a look down here in this very small print here. It says form can accept up to 1 gigabyte. So we want to change that and make sure that it can accept as much as possible. So I clicked the change button and it took me right to settings. And I'm going to come over and just change it to my highest. So I should have 1 terabyte there. Come back to questions tab. I'm going to scroll back down to decoding. So now I'm seeing that this form can accept up to 1 terabyte of files. So I'm going to change this. And that's all we have to do to create our progress monitoring goal. So what's going to happen with this is all going to feed into a spreadsheet, which I will show later, and we'll be able to click on these artifacts. When you're uploading an artifact, that artifact can be a Google Doc. It can be a picture that you've taken from your phone. It can be something that a student has created electronically and you've maybe done a screen grab, something like that. If they've completed a curriculum-based assessment electronically, you can upload that as well. So there's lots of options for ways to collect artifacts. And then this is going to allow us to house them all electronically. And then you don't have to hold on to all of these hard copies. And then we'll have this information from year to year to save so that we can report out if ever needed. All right, we're going to pause here before we move on to the next step.